Hello, John. Welcome to Leadership Inside Out. It is a pleasure. It's been too many years, but welcome to
Far
the
too many.
podcast.
Thanks, Guy. Yeah, it's good to be here. Looking forward to sharing hopefully some good knowledge and experience, and a few little stories along the way of the times when it went badly as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. John, thank you. We were just before we started filming, we were just talking about, when you first started coding a few years ago, one or two. Do you want to start back
Just a
there
few.
and let us know, where you started, what those sort of major road points, road stages were?
Yeah, certainly. So, yeah, it was a whopping 38 years ago now. My parents' friend brought this computer thing home from school. She was a teacher. And I sat down. I'd heard about it. I got a book out from the library. You remember going to libraries for books?
I still do.
Apparently, you still can.
Yes.
Fantastic. So, yeah, I sat down and started, trying to write a little bit of code. I absolutely loved it.
Wow.
And the thing I liked, it was almost like problem solving, solving puzzles and so on, but on a almost like a grander scale. The possibilities of this machine were incredible. It just excited me so much. I spent my entire career on it.
Wow. Wow. So at school, computers clearly.
Funnily enough, yeah. So you would think, oh, study computers at school, study computers later, and in a way, I did. But I was such a nerd. I'm almost certain if it had been um, a thing when I was at school, I'd have been diagnosed as somewhere well on the spectrum. But that level of focus was just insane. Every spare minute, while my friends were all chasing girls and learning how to conduct, human relationships and social conventions, I was busy tapping away at a keyboard, learning how to write code.
Wow. Wow. So clearly an inspirational moment in your life. Where did that take you? What did that first job? Was that university, then a job, or?
Yeah, so it took me. I suppose the marker of it all is curiosity.
Mhm.
I was always curious. My parents would say, you ask why. I'd be apparently as a toddler walking along the road with my mum, going to the shops, saying, "What can I do? I'm bored. What's interesting? What's happening?" I always want to know what's going on. I always want to. I used to get household items, alarm clocks, hoovers, whatever, take them apart. I wanted to find out how they worked. So that took me on a journey up to university level where I did a course called microelectronics. That you know the words
I
micro
do.
and electronics. What it actually means is sort of microchips, all of the stuff that's inside a computer.
Wow.
So I kind of took that to a bit of an extreme level. I wanted to know how this works down to atoms and physics and everything. And what that's given me is a very deep understanding. There's a wonderful Dilbert episode, if we're still allowed to talk about Scott Adams, that's a whole other subject, called The Knack, where Dilbert's mum takes him to a doctor, and he's busy sort of fiddling with machines, and the doctor turns to his mum with a grave face and sort of said, "I'm sorry to tell you, Mrs. Dilbert, he's got the knack." That engineering, then that curiosity, wanting to know how everything works, and being willing to put the work in to find out.
Wow.
Yeah. Can I just pause there for a second, Guy? Because there might be some people listening who think, well, oh, I only picked this up later. I was into skateboards or boys or girls or mountain climbing or whatever when I was that age. And so what hope have I got of being great at project management or IT or whatever? So I just I wanted to share something which I read a little while ago. Can't remember the reference offhand, but we'll put it in the notes. And it said, it takes 7 years to become expert level at something. Now, think how long we all live and how long we've got a good working life for. You've got time in your life to become expert level at least 5, 6, 7 different things if you want to.
Yeah.
So it's not too late. And it's just about having that curiosity.
Yeah, no, it's a very powerful message. And, you know, clearly, if you're lucky enough, I was, to find something in your teenage years, then that gets you through that very first and sometimes the most difficult hurdle of that first job. But even then, you can never stop. You never have to stop reinventing yourself and trying new things.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So into your first job, techie job?
Yeah, it was. It was a part-time job. Actually, let's backtrack slightly. So I did dog walking for a little while. I did a couple of odd jobs, you know, in summers as a student. But my first proper job, if you will, was in my last year at university. I needed to earn some extra money, mainly because I'd failed the second year. You know, you think, oh, sure, he's very academic, he's going to pass everything. But actually, I was more interested in how things work, not so much completing exams and learning things by rote. So I was the one who, I could do all of the practical stuff, but those people who really studied hard and got, you know, top grades, they came to me for advice on the practical stuff. Because I was curious enough to dig into things and find out how they work, not just learn things from paper.
Wow.
So I think, you know, you can, going off on a tangent slightly, you can apply that to anything in life. If I'm curious about podcasts, so I spent time with a podcast expert recently, learning all about sort of how that's created, you know, how it kind of came out of the days of radio, how microphones work, all of that stuff. I want to know things at such a deep level. So where were we? I went off
last year of university, first proper job, needing a bit of money.
That's right. So I worked for a little IT company in Manchester, and did sort of a lot of IT work for them, and they became my first proper job out of university. I'd got married quite young, and you know, there was going to be a family coming at some point soon. So my wife at the time and I decided we wanted to have kids quite young, so that by the time we got to our 40s, we were home free. They still cost money, by the way.
How deluded we were in those days.
Absolutely, yeah. Love them to bits, wouldn't change them for the world, but yes. So that first job really, it gave me freedom, because the owner of the company at the time, a really incredibly hardworking Iranian chap called Harry. I did not appreciate at the time what it took to run a business, and I still look back at how hard he worked and how passionate and how invested he was in the people in the business, as an example of what hard graft looks like. So I hope I meet him again at some point to say that. But that job gave me the freedom to experiment, to learn, and to put systems in place that helped that business. Learn to, you know, I ended up with a couple of people to manage, started doing a little bit of teaching and so on. Bear in mind, I'm like barely more than a child, 22 years old. So, went through all of that, then got a job at an internet company. Now, for the younger listeners, there was a time when internet meant very slow modems. You had to forcibly kind of tell your computer to connect, and you went online for a short while because otherwise mum would get annoyed about the cost of the phone bill. There was a period where going on the internet was like a special thing that you did occasionally. And then it became more and more normal. And finally, we got flat rate internet where you paid £10 a month, £15 a month, and you could have all the internet you wanted. My early career went across that period, and I ended up working for an internet provider called Supernet, which was linked to a company called Time Computers, and became one of their engineers. We called it a backbone engineering job. Backbone meaning the big connections that went between, say, Manchester and London, or London and Leeds, or London and Amsterdam, over to New York. That's your internet backbone, and I learned a lot about that. Now, something quite interesting that came out of that is I'm hesitant about sort of saying this in public, but it's kind of a fun story. But again, I was given the freedom that my management at the time recognized my potential, probably recognized that I was a bit of a risk taker, but also extremely curious and wanted to know how everything worked. So I became the guy that knew how everything worked.
Right.
I also got called the random engineering department because I would randomly engineer stuff. It didn't always go well.
Right.
Most of the time it went okay. I think that's the only reason I got to keep the job. Now, we're building up to the point in 2001, 2002-ish, when everything went pop.
Yeah.
What had happened was this amazing new thing called the internet had come along. It's a highly technical thing. Most people don't really understand it. They just think, oh, internet, lots of people are going to make lots of money out of that. Let's throw money into it. So lots of investors threw lots of money into anything with internet written on it. And lo and behold, lots of those promises didn't come to pass. And at the end of the day, you need real people selling real products to real people to make real money. Now, if you just repeat what I said, but you change internet for Bitcoin or AI.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about that, but you know.
Yes. Yeah.
We've only managed to get 10 minutes into the conversation when we've mentioned AI, so that's good.
Well, I try never to mention it. Now, I thoroughly appreciate it. I'm a bit of an old dog in technology terms, and I'm not an early adopter of new technology. So my approach, Guy, is always to make better use of 2 or 3 year old technology than the early adopters are making use of cutting edge technology. So I want my customers to be using stuff that's been tried and tested and just works, and that people understand and know how to support. And so we don't need to be using the very latest in AI tech, in Bitcoin, in whatever internet-based technology has come out yesterday that we probably don't know about yet, because it's just about how easily can I do my job? How easily can I get my products delivered? How easily can I organize my warehouse, get my purchase orders, that kind of thing.
Yes, for most of us, people buy from people.
Exactly. It's about the relationship, and that's this is where I'm going to sound about 80, but that's missing from the internet these days. We've got so much in the way of technology which takes the human relationship out of it, that it's easy to miss that. Now we've got quite an interesting approach to that, and I'll just indulge me for a moment, because one of the things that we do is automate purchase ordering. So we make it so that the customer and the supplier don't have to manually type in purchase orders, don't have to manually type in invoices. It's all automatically keyed in, because the customer gets to order from an e-commerce website, like the kind of website we use when we go home in the evening. Now, the reason I mention it is, if you start automating this stuff and the customer, instead of phoning up Joe in sales and saying, can I have a quote for 73 branded mugs, please? you are able to order those from a website and not have to interact with a human. You think, okay, John, why are you talking about the importance of relationship and partnership and nurturing that? And at the same time, you're taking that away by putting these automated solutions in place. Well, my take is if you take away the kind of drudgery of those jobs, you can still phone up Joe in sales, but you can have a chat about your marketing events that are coming up, or your new strategy for what business is going to look like next year, while taking away that day-to-day, I want 73 mugs, I want 47 t-shirts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's and automating allows you to focus on the key connections, not the transactions.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
So early doors
Mm-hmm.
Into the internet, .com boom and bust.
That's it.
Obviously.
Yes, very much the bust. So the bust happened. The whole industry kind of imploded because I heard a salesman at the time put it a really good way. We're all selling to each other, and nobody's selling to the actual customer.
Yes.
You can see that now. The technology companies are all sort of in bed with each other and creating all these amazing solutions, but we care less and less about that end customer.
Yes.
I hope it's okay to sort of use company names here, but if you take an Amazon or a Facebook, they don't really care about the end customer. They care about getting orders. So if you get an order from a large online retailer, for example, and there's something wrong with it, the most cost-effective thing for them to do is write that off and replace it. So there's a huge amount of waste going on. There's a huge amount of not caring about getting that individual order to you at a high level of quality, and so on. With your now, I'll come back to that because I've said something that's not quite true. With the likes of Facebook, the easiest measure of where the value is if you're not paying for it, then you are the product. So I know that I get to use Facebook for free, I get to use some Google services for free, and in return they get my data about what I'm doing, what I like, what I'm into, and so on.
And then they sell that to somebody that is prepared to pay for it.
That's it. So it's a really interesting period in time where these big companies are figuring out, well, we've got to make money, of course, happy with that, and people now have this expectation that everything on the internet is free or very cheap, and the big companies are reinforcing that expectation, and they're creating a market where only those big companies can really compete. If we go back to Amazon, for example, they shift a lot of products, and we order, we get it the next day, and that's great. But I talk to, in my role in B2B sales, we talk to a lot of retailers who sell through Amazon Marketplace, and it is very, very, very hard for them to stay on that platform as a seller, because Amazon aren't short of sellers. They can treat the sellers in very, very harsh terms, making them comply with insanely high standards, which is in a way good for the consumer because we get our products quickly, we know they're coming, they get reviewed, etc., etc. But it makes it an extremely hard place for those distributors of products to make money. And of course, the people who really do make a lot of money out of it is always the marketplace.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amazon doesn't seem to be struggling a little at the moment, but
not really. No. Funnily enough, a lot of the other large retail groups have cottoned onto this and created their own marketplaces. So, for example, did you know the B&Q website isn't just B&Q products? Lots and lots of different suppliers can upload their products and sell through the B&Q marketplace. There are quite a few of these marketplaces now, so I think that's going to be a more popular route. You know, the marketplace does the marketing, um, the they take a margin in return for that. They get the consumers in,
Yep.
and the suppliers upload their products. I suppose it's almost like an online take of a shopping mall. We'll get the consumers in, you set up the stall.
Yeah, and we'll take a margin.
Yeah, but we've kind of we've dived off topic a bit there. That's kind of my nature. Go back. So the whole internet thing back in 2001, 2, it sort of imploded. Many companies went bust, and what had happened was really consumers were finally on the winning side again, because people had pushed prices of internet access and internet stuff services so low that you had to be big or very good in order to compete.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people were made redundant. I took my nice redundancy package and thought, you know what? I know nothing about business, nothing about sales, nothing about marketing. I'm going to start a company. The stupidest thing I ever did, wouldn't change it for the world.
And is it 19 years now, I think, John, that you're still
that was 2002, so we're 2025, 23 years ago now. Yes, yeah. So I started that business. We sold websites. We did various. It was essentially, you know, anything I could do that somebody could help me sell, I'll do. Eventually, it was me on my own. Took on some staff, and we built an e-commerce platform.
Wow.
Now, this is something that we're seeing a bit more of these days. That was in the promotional products industry. So I built a system in about 2005, 6, which allowed us to have, you know, one installation of the software, if you like, one big piece of software, if you will, and that could support hundreds of different websites. So at one point, this piece of software had about 1,500 promotional products websites on it.
Wow.
And the turnover on there was $20 million a year or something like that, combined across all of the websites. So they were good times. And what was really successful about that, relating back to the whole, you know, you are the product thing, is these business-to-business sales could set up a branded website just for that customer. So when we get into B2B sales, you want to make the customer feel special. You want it to be a partnership, an ongoing relationship. So your promotional products companies wanted to set up, let's imagine, you know, we've got Guy Ellis Leadership Inside Out, and you want a load of branded merchandise for that. And suddenly you're an international superstar, and you've got, you know, hundreds of people working for you, millions of followers, and you need branded merchandise for that. So what would happen, if you've got hundreds of people working for you, or thousands, many of those might need to order that merchandise. They'll have marketing events, they'll have, you know, trade fairs to set up for, all sorts of reasons. They might just want a branded Guy Ellis t-shirt. Who wouldn't? So
what can I say?
What will happen is the promotional merchandise distributor will set up a Guy Ellis Leadership Inside Out branded website with your products, your prices, your logo, etc. And any of your team can then go on and place an order for them. So this became a really popular way of creating customer loyalty, making it easier to do B2B sales, just making life good for the customer in that industry. And that's really why I love B2B, because we can get away from the, you know, millions of people going to one shop and being treated like sheep, to hundreds of customers all being treated individually.
Nice.
And so what we've specialized in is helping those B2B distributors sell better online and create those branded stores, you know, connect them to customer systems, do all kinds of magic and automation around purchase ordering, invoicing, that sort of thing.
Wow. And I assume that, you know, from the way you've been talking, you know, that because you've only got hundreds of customers rather than thousands, tens of thousands, you can actually have that connection with them.
Yeah, it's a really important thing for us. As the business grows, we want to keep that one-to-one relationship with an account manager talking to a customer. And at the moment, as Get John, we're probably on about 10 to 15 clients right now.
Right.
And what we like to do is just nurture those relationships. We're coming up to our 10-year anniversary with our largest client.
Wow.
So we're going to be celebrating that later this year.
Wow.
And so it just sort of shows we've been able to grow with them. We've been able to be flexible enough to meet their needs. And that's really what that kind of partnership is about. It's not saying, here is a product, you take it or you don't. It comes in 3 colors and that's your only choice.
Yeah.
It's about saying, what do you need?
Yeah. And I mean, I'd love to explore that, in a moment, because I think that's a very powerful message for AI and, future technology developments, because, clearly AI could be a huge threat for many people, for many people's roles, but it's also potentially opportunity. But before we go into that, I'd just like to understand, I mean, so you went from paid employment, young family, relatively.
Yeah.
And the security of a paycheck. I mean, I understand, of course, the dot boom crash, lots of people out of work. What was that shift, though? What gave you that courage? What sent you down that route of starting your own business? Because as you say, you hadn't had that opportunity. You were a self-professed nerd. You like go deep into things, and business, by setting up your own business, is by definition very generalist.
Well, there was another side to me, Guy, which was the social side. So I have a friend called Andrew who refers to me as the affable techie, and so I've always, although I'm a nerd and I'll sort of bury my head in software manuals for hours on end and experimenting, all that side of it. At the same time, I really enjoy talking to people, and I credit mainly my mother with that, both mum and dad. But my mother used to sit me down after school. I would sit and watch her making the dinner for everybody. I've got there were 4 boys, 3 younger brothers.
Wow.
I'd watch her make the dinner. She'd say, "What have you been doing on that computer thing?" And I would have to explain in plain English what I've been doing. So I learned early on how to kind of translate the technical, mystical black box world into everyday English. And people have always said that, I've been able to make things understandable for them, which has been good. Obviously, that's good in a sales aspect, but at the same time, I'm kind of, I enjoy being sociable with people. So I used to, in that career that we talked about before the whole crash and redundancy and so on, I used to hang out with the sales team, because they would learn that I was the techie they could go to ask questions like, how does this work? What does this mean? So working with the sales team, I then sort of started spotting opportunities. Oh, that guy mentioned this problem. I learned to ask better questions like, what's your real problem? There was a chap who did a series of podcasts a few years ago called Derek Halpern on marketing, and one of his podcasts stuck with me for life. It was what people will say, won't say, and can't say. So, for example, if you're talking to a sales prospect, what they will say is, I want a super flashy website with all the latest bells and whistles. What they won't say is something they're still conscious of, which is, if I don't make this website really good, my boss is going to be unhappy and I might lose my job. Of course, they won't tell you that, but this is what's weighing on their mind. And the can't say is what they're not conscious of, the fears that really, really drive people. And if you can get to those, you can really start to form a good relationship and understand people.
Right.
So the can't say might be, well, if I lose my job, I won't be able to support my family, or I won't be able to take this opportunity, or I won't be able to live in this nice place, and then my life will fall apart and everything will be rubbish. And these kind of primal fears are what really drive people. But just digging into that a bit more, so I realise some of our listeners are going to be just starting out in their careers and starting out in learning how to either sell or market themselves or be proud of what they do. And one of the issues with that is to get to somebody's deepest fears, to get to the real problem that the customer's got, you have to have a good relationship, and you can only create that relationship through being vulnerable. There's a wonderful TED talk on being vulnerable by Brené Brown, which we should definitely link in the notes. I'll pop that over to you. But it's about the power of being vulnerable means that people will then open up to you. So if I can sort of sum up that approach to how I got access to the customers that I did back in the day, and how I got into the conversations that I did, even at a young age, people were kind of opening up to me about things they wouldn't even talk to their staff about. A lot of it was about having the courage to be vulnerable with somebody.
I mean, it's an incredibly powerful message, and I see that in my my day-to-day interactions with clients. Is I can't simply be a sounding board. I can't simply be a solid, non-smiling face. You have to engage. You have to make people feel comfortable, and as you say, doing that by being a little vulnerable and admitting your own fears is a very powerful tool. But also it's an approach. Some people abuse that. Some of us, that's the way that we choose to interact with the world. So powerful.
It is, yeah. So I realised we've kind of skirted around the whole thing, making that jump. So putting myself back into my 21, 22-year-old shoes. I think when I made the jump, I was probably early 20s. Can't do the numbers right now, which is odd for a maths nerd. But it was about seeing the opportunity. So I've always been conscious that I have a skill. I spent a lot of time learning that skill and perfecting it and trying it out and so on. And something I always try and do is just take advantage of opportunities when they crop up. There's a wonderful phrase: we make our own luck.
Yes.
And then there's the old, I think it was Voltaire who said, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. So if we're prepared to take advantage of those things that come up, we can say yes to many more things, get more experience, and you learn so much more quickly.
Yes.
So a good example of that, trying to think of the best example, probably back, before I made the jump, before the dot-com bust and the redundancy, I had an opportunity to get involved with a project with a sales team who were ex-inner city bank workers and salespeople. So, early 20s, very green around the ears. I got dragged into sales meetings with bankers who were doing, £1 million deals here and there and so on, taken into banks in the middle of London, taken out for, slap up meals with champagne and so on, because I was the friendly sales techie. And the salespeople were boosted because they could say to me, what does this mean, John? How much does that cost? What does this do? And I could explain in English. They were happy to put me in front of customers.
Which is an enormous credit to you, because a lot of my career has been with salespeople as well, and they don't risk potential sales if they think somebody's not up to the job.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. I'll share one little hack because much as I hate these little hacks because you can't work around years of experience. One of them is we gravitate towards friendly faces,
Yes.
and a lot of people have what they call sort of resting bitch face, sort of, and it's no kind of conscious thing. It's just naturally sort of your natural state
Yeah.
of your face is sort of like so. Now, if you know anything about body language and so on, I've listened to a lot about this. And by the way, a little bit of encouragement for the younger listeners. You can learn, you don't have to naturally be able to do body language, social cues, confidence, all of those are learnable skills, just like computing or HR or whatever.
Absolutely. So, you can train your body to be open and responsive and more available to others.
Completely, yeah. And it's important to recognize that's not being fake in any way. Yep. It's simply about learning to navigate the world just as you learn your craft.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the little hack that I want to share is I consciously realized when I was in my maybe mid-20s that I was sort of, my default face was like this. And I consciously trained myself to default to a smile. So my natural face, if you see me walking along the street, you'll probably see this. And it's a very subtle change, but just like the way it changes the shape of your face, it just makes you so much more approachable. So I can now walk into a room full of complete strangers and leave with several friends just by being approachable.
You're no longer a threat, you're open, you're confident.
Yeah.
All of these things that people gravitate to if they're slightly feeling nervous or a little unsure or, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. So many people start their career looking at, people my age or whatever, thinking, oh, they've got it all together. Oh, they're so professional. Oh, they never have any worries. Are they, why am I feeling so nervous? Look at them. Not realizing that actually, we all bleed red. We're all prone to the same kind of anxieties and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's really important to encourage people to realize that we can all be a little bit vulnerable, and people really appreciate it. People appreciate being recognized as a human being with faults and failings and flaws, and they appreciate, oh, here's somebody I can actually relate to, not somebody I have to put the mask on and pretend to be amazing in front of.
Yeah, amazing, brilliant. So we've sort of skirted around your current role. I mean, you've been in that job, grew it from one. You were saying earlier, you hit 12, I think, last year for a particular project.
Yeah.
What have been some of the highlights, some of the difficulties, some of the things that you've stepped back thinking, what am I going to do with this one over those 22, 23 years?
Yeah, there's a lot of stories. I'm going to pick out a couple of highlights for you, Guy. So jumping right back to the start of that career, the jump from employment to self-employment was really about seeing that opportunity. So I talked about having that opportunity to work with the sales team, which I created by being curious and being approachable, and seeing how they worked and seeing how they looked at opportunities. I remember being sat with a friend of mine, Steve, that I started the first business with. We were looking out of a London hotel room window across the Thames, and we saw office lights in a skyscraper or something on Canary Wharf. And we said to each other, every single one of those offices is an opportunity. And it just kind of opened up that curiosity again about what can I make of this? What can I do out there? I'm kind of chained to this desk and this role and this set of products that we sell, and I want to be able to do anything for anybody. And of course, you start out your career with anything for anybody, and you end up, here we are 20 years later thinking, let's niche down and have a single product that's really easy to sell, and the whole cycle starts again. So a couple of let's do a SH1T sandwich, shall we? So we'll have a highlight and a low light and a highlight. So one of the big highlights was probably building that first e-commerce platform that I talked about. So the one that was used by 1,500 promotional products merchants at the time across the UK. I was working with a large company based out of Manchester, still going today in various different forms. I'm still friends with a lot of the people there, and building that platform from scratch taught me everything that I needed to know about e-commerce. How complex it can be. A lot of people think, oh, it's just products, shopping cart, a checkout, easy, right? But there's so much complexity goes in, especially in business to business.
Yeah.
So for example, we were one of the first companies in possibly the world, maybe in the UK, to add something called a punch out to that platform. Now, punch out is a bit of a weird term. It's actually an old arcade game as well, but it's where you are a buyer sat in a large company, maybe a Rolls Royce or something like that. And as a buyer, you log on to your intranet, which you do every day, and you want to buy from this supplier. You punch out through that intranet, landing on the supplier's website where you can find your products, add them to your cart, and easily create your purchase order. No manual data entry needed. So this technology was prompted, almost nobody in the UK had heard of it at that time. It was prompted by a US contract that we had. And they said, oh, our clients asked for this. We don't know what it is. We don't know anything about it. 2007, I built the first one of those. And in the last, how far is that, 17 years, I've probably done sort of 50 to 100 of those different integrations between clients and suppliers systems. So literally connecting the client system to the supplier system so that all the data goes electronically. Now, the idea of doing that has been around for decades, dating back to the 80s. They called it EDI in those days. They still do in many companies, and it's a way of automating trade. Yeah. But so few companies understand it. And what we were doing was actually bringing that ability to smaller companies that didn't have a massive IT department, didn't have an army of developers on board. We were saying, here's a feature, we'll set it up for you, it's ready to go, use it. So I'm really, really proud of the platform that we built, and that was reflected in the sale price of my first business back in 2010. So moving on from that, there was one low light, which I think it's okay to mention. This as a scuba diving company based up here in the north. Now, the scuba diving market at the time was extremely competitive. Suppliers were squeezing margins. It was a very, very difficult time, and those companies were struggling to survive anyway. And some wonderful people bought a scuba diving sales business and contracted me to set up the website. Now, at the time, we'd done mostly business-to-business websites, and this was a business-to-consumer website. And we'd done one or two of those, we sort of on a smaller scale. There were a few things that went wrong with that project, and unfortunately, the company didn't survive. I think the main thing that I would highlight is that we tried to take a business and the people in it from a level 1 understanding of e-commerce to level 10 in one step. And we wanted to do that, they wanted to do that, everybody wanted to jump to level 10, best of the best, immediately on day one for launch. What we learned is that doing that, you actually have to go through several steps in between, because there's a learning process that you have to go through. And everybody ended up suffering because we didn't go through those learning steps. We tried to launch something that was far too big, far too complex, and the team wasn't there to support it, the data wasn't there to support it. Little things like, it's only one big learning point that's come out of that, is every time we now talk about an e-commerce website, we ask people for a simple metric, which is how many different product codes are there, how many SKUs, and also how many different attributes are there: size, color, fit, dimensions, weight, price, trade price, etc., etc. Because if you've got 10 products and they've got color and size, that's really easy to do with. You've got 10, let's say they've got color, size, and price. Dead simple. 3 attributes, 10 products, 30 different individual pieces of data to look at. If you've got 50,000 products, and in one case I think we had 40 different attributes against each product, you've got, what's that, 2 million individual pieces of data to look at. Have I got my maths right there?
Yes, yes.
But yeah, so very, very quickly, the amount of data that you've got to have accurate, correct, and accounted for on your website has gone from 30 pieces to 2 million pieces. And it's an incredibly time-consuming thing to get all of that right. And the second thing that we find that we also learned from this project is the people in the business have to be sort of involved in the project. A wonderful chap I worked with called Roger, a phrase about project management. It says a project is an interruption to day-to-day business, a temporary interruption to day-to-day business. Now, think about that for a second.
Yeah.
You're asking your client to take a step out of their day-to-day role and be part of this project that you're doing for them. So it's great, you do the project, you get paid, but you're asking them to step out of their day-to-day job, asking them to do something outside of their job. And actually, if their job is busy enough, you're asking them to do extra work.
Yes.
So we meet a lot of clients who want to give you the project and come back when it's done.
Yeah.
And the trouble is, if I gave somebody something and they came back when it was done, they wouldn't know anything about it. They wouldn't know all the whys and the wherefores and the reasons, and we'd have to teach them and train them. And you don't get that same buy-in if the client isn't involved in the project. You don't build up the same relationship.
No, it's a journey, not an outcome.
It certainly is a journey. Yes. Yeah. So those were the 2 biggest learning points that we had from that project. They are the amount of data that you're dealing with, going from level 1 to level 10, and so make that 3 points. Having the client deeply involved with what's happening on the project at every stage.
Wow.
So I promised a sandwich. Let's end with a highlight in terms of learning points. So we had another project. I'll go back to the one that I talked about before we were online, for a small company you may have heard of called Helly Hansen. Now, we got a contract to build a portal for Helly Hansen because they needed a particular client of theirs needed this punch-out technology that I talked about. It was and what we're seeing is some of these big corporations are making this punch-out or something else called single sign-on a mandatory requirement of their suppliers.
Wow.
In order to win contracts. So suppliers who can offer this are winning bigger contracts, just because it makes it easier for the buyer.
Yeah.
So we got contracted by Helly Hansen to do this thing, and I was in a state of joy when we got that, because way back when I was at school, you had to have a Helly Hansen ski jacket to be cool. And then here's me building a portal to sell Helly Hansen ski jackets. So surely I am now the coolest kid in the school.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
John, I mean, as you look back, actually before then, what does the future hold for you?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. I talked about going full circle, and when I started out in my career, it was because I felt kind of constrained. We were selling specific products. We had specific things we were doing, and I wanted to get out there and see what opportunities the world had. I was curious. We are now getting to the point where I want to step back and go from being a doer to a teacher, advisor, hopefully seen as an expert in something, and able to just pass on all of that knowledge that I've spent years building. Somebody said to me the other day, we go through the first half of our lives filling up the tank of knowledge and experience, and the second half of our lives we just empty that tank and give it all away. So I'm at that stage of wanting to give it all away and share the knowledge and experience that I've gained by having chats like this, writing, by teaching, training people. And so that means we've got to have something that is easy enough to train people on. It's easy enough for a salesperson to sell without having 20 years of technical experience. And that means going back to niching down and turning things back into products. We need a clear, understandable product that we're selling. So we are focusing on our integration tool. We have a platform which handles these single sign-ons, punch-outs, all that kind of connecting buyers and suppliers together to make commerce and trade easier.
Well done. Wow.
So we're focusing on that this year. We are building the product at the moment, and we're going to be launching that at some point soon. I'm not going to make any promises, because promises and IT do not go together.
No, by definition, they are not good bid fellows.
Absolutely right. Yes. Yeah. IT projects very rarely run on time. I was talking to somebody earlier about this, and I said, if you ever get a fixed price from an IT person, it means they've taken a risk on whether they'll be able to complete it sooner or whether it's going to get more complex.
Yeah.
So anytime there's a fixed price in IT, somebody somewhere is taking a risk.
And it's not the customer, which is the usual place.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know quite a few other agencies who do sort of bespoke builds of websites and so on, and many of them have had to de-risk their own products by making certain additional services just billable at an hourly rate, because it's almost impossible to price put a fixed price on something that you don't know how many times you're going to have to talk to the customer about it, how many changes there are going to be. It becomes impossible to price.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. So looking back, we've covered a lot of ground today, but looking back, what advice would you give your younger self?
Apart from don't do it.
Apart from don't do it, which I given the smile on your face, I don't think that,
I don't really believe it. No. I think picking up on some of the points I was talking about earlier, the advice I'd give is, stay curious.
Yeah.
Don't lose that childlike sense of curiosity about how things work. Ask the stupid questions in the meetings. You sat around in a meeting with some business bigwigs, and there's a question that clearly somebody should be asking, but nobody's daring to ask it. Be the one who asks the stupid questions.
Yeah.
And be proud of that. I would also say learn finance. So it's really easy for somebody who's not, an accountant or doesn't want to be an accountant to ignore the financial side of these things. But very early on, I learned how products can be priced, how they can be sold. Learned about company structure. You need a basic understanding of finance to, things like being able to read a profit and loss sheet, being able to read a set of accounts for a particular company that you're looking to sell to, for example.
Yeah.
So be curious, learn some finance, enough to get by. And let's say, I always like things to come in threes. So I think let's have a book recommendation. I love a good book recommendation. And in fact, I'd like to be a bit cheeky and put 2 books in. So the first one is one of the best books on leadership which I ever read, Leadership Style. So I got into thinking about company culture. What kind of culture do we want to create? And Gareth, my co-owner, and I are trying to create a company where neurodiverse people can do their best work. Now, that also implies that anybody, who's differently abled, who's people who are stressed, people who are anxious, just normal everyday people who've got normal everyday people problems, are supported and encouraged and given the tools that they need to do their best work. So the book I read which really helped to shape that is called, get ready for this, Why Do Incompetent Men Become Leaders?
It's a very fine question.
Yes, yeah. Now the book, it's not man bashing. It's really about why do we celebrate those sort of toxic male traits or traditionally male traits of overconfidence and pushing people down to get what you want and bullying and so on. And we put people who claw and bully and fight their way to the top on the cover of Time magazine.
Yeah.
Whereas so many more traditionally feminine traits like nurturing and empathy and so on can be far, far more valuable in leadership.
Absolutely.
So yeah, great book. We'll put the link in the notes. The other book, which is almost like my management Bible, is High Output Management by Andy Grove.
Okay.
Now it's an old book, so the language is a little bit dated. But if you read past that, it is literally a book about how this chap, Andy Grove, went from being an engineer on the shop floor, an immigrant who sort of had to learn the language and so on, to being chief exec of Intel.
Wow.
And so this guy literally seen everything from every level. And what he's done, I talked earlier about how social skills and confidence and so on can be learned like any other skill.
Yep.
This guy literally learned management as a skill and then shared it with everybody in this book. It is fairly short, but it's the most incredible book on management technique that I've ever seen.
We'll certainly get those out. So thank you.
Absolute pleasure, Guy.
Thank you. I mean, it's been an absolute treasure of information. Any last thoughts before we close up for the session?
I think never grow up. That sense of curiosity can take you down all sorts of interesting paths. Just last night, I got to see a gig that I would never have seen because a friend messaged me and said, "Oh, my plus one can't go. Fancy a gig?" And oh yeah, okay. I love to say yes to random opportunities that crop up. I love to kind of explore different conversations that might never have happened. Ask the silly questions, and don't be afraid to be curious and ask the silly questions and find things out.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. I love these sessions, these podcasts. You again have just proved to me why they're so wonderful. You've got this amazing experience. Your ability to communicate it is outstanding, and
Thank you.
I've genuinely really loved the time we've had together. So thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom, and your thoughts.
Guy, it's been an absolute joy. Hope to talk again soon.
Good.